Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hivemind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Now, this video has honestly been probably the hardest video I've ever had to make. This is literally the 6th time that I try to record this same video, and that's because this is probably the craziest news cycle of all time. I mean, the year 2020 headed into early 2021. I've never seen anything like this in my life, and it's kind of difficult when things get this nuts. I don't want to rush to judgment. I don't want to have an emotional reactionary response, so I've taken a day, I've re-recorded and re-recorded, I've thought, I've looked into, and I've gathered all of my thoughts, and pretty much here is where I stand on the Capitol being stormed on January 6th. The first thing that I have to address is probably the most contentious element of this whole thing, is you have right-wingers who are claiming that it was an Antifa false flag, it was Antifa dressed up as Trump supporters who had breached the Capitol. There's many videos of Trump supporters trying to tell them to stop, they're yelling out Antifa stop, and then of course there's the opposing element, which is debunking a lot of the pictures and a lot of the claims of specific individuals being quote Antifa members as being total BS. And here's the thing, both sides are true. Some of the pictures that people are sharing claiming that these are Antifa members, the person was pictured at a BLM rally, etc., etc., some of those are just flat out misinformation. That's just a fact. If we're looking at this thing absolutely objectively, that is just a fact. With that being said, however, is there a possibility that some people were there in black clad or pretending to be Trump supporters? Yes, of course, this is fully possible. Is that entirely to blame? And was it just an Antifa false flag, a government false flag? I don't think so either. I think there's a ton of people who got caught up in this whole mess. Mob mentality is a serious thing, and they did something which I definitely think they should not have done. I definitely believe that certain right-wingers and certain unsavory figures that I don't believe are right-wingers, white nationalist types and more extremist types that I don't think represent Trumpism as a whole, I don't think they represent this nationalist populist movement that Trumpism is supposed to be about. I believe they were a factor as well, and I think the whole thing as a whole is just bad optics. It's a win for the left, absolutely, especially with their complete control over culture, over media, over information, and the spread of information through their algorithms and tech companies. This was not a good thing. It was objectively a loss for the populist movement that's grown so much over the last couple years. And I will say unequivocally that regardless of who is perpetrating any of this violence, I disavow it entirely, and it does not represent where I stand, and I don't think it represents most of the people. The focus yesterday wasn't supposed to be on some sort of LARPing event, getting into Nancy Pelosi's office and taking pictures and stealing podiums. I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed watching it and thought it was thrilling and exciting, but that shouldn't have been the focus yesterday. The focus should have been on people like this. Those are the patriots, those are the people who have had their voices drowned, not only by the media, but by the events that played out yesterday. And of course, that same connection, the media is going to completely ignore these folk and focus entirely on headlines to attack, slander, and demonize the right wing. The party of abolish the police can now grandstand as the party of law and order. Notice how all of the words that they're using are very similar to the words that we use to call them out in their absolute dereliction of duty and inability to call out the domestic terrorism of Antifa and BLM that we saw for over 100 days. It's funny how the tune switches when the narrative switches. The optics were clearly bad, and that's why I think a lot of people are rushing to the conclusion that it was a false flag. It's actually very similar to what we saw during the early days of BLM. We knew for a fact the BLM riots on the streets, which of course we must say were 100, even 1,000 times worse than anything that we saw on January 6th. We knew that that was BLM and Antifa. We knew that they were using the exact same tactics that they've always used. But of course, the left, what did they say? They obfuscated from the truth and pretended as if it was a false flag, as if the Boogaloo Boys or right-wingers had infiltrated the organization and were the ones who perpetrated the violence. They lied, and we called them out for it. Now we can't stand here with a straight face and try to do the exact same thing and run away from the issue. We must, unequivocally, wait for all of the information to come out, wait for investigations to be made, arrests to be made, for folks who engaged in the violence and in the mayhem and in the riots to be identified and condemn the actions wholeheartedly while understanding motivation and political affiliation. That's how we remain consistent, not by jumping to conclusion, spreading misinformations that we might find politically comfortable or politically expedient, and we must be consistent. The exact opposite of what the left is doing right now in being absolutely inconsistent in the way that they treated left-wingers during the early days of the violence in BLM and throughout, in respect to, of course, how they act when it's right-wingers that could potentially be involved. 4 lives were lost. One of them, a 14-year US Air Force veteran. Clearly, this wasn't a win for us. I think there's a whole lot of blame to go around. I'm not going to sit here and pretend as if the president president's to blame after he's repeatedly condemned violence, after watching every single one of his speeches and not being able to find a single element of him, quote, inciting violence, as the media may say. I'm not going to blame Trump supporters and I'm not going to blame right-wingers because, as we know, 99.99% of them remained peaceful, and even some of them who got caught up in the mayhem and actually entered the Capitol itself, none of them were armed like some people are saying. Most of them were just engaging in buffoonery and trying to meme while in the Capitol instead of do anything violent. No lives were lost of officers after the infiltration. It wasn't a violent invasion. In fact, the lives that were lost were actually people who were storming in and being shot or attacked as the guards were defending Congress. I'm not going to blame Antifa and I'm not going to blame left-wingers because I find that would be counterproductive. We need to somehow approach this thing responsibly and productively. We need to figure out how to move forward from here. The movement that we're a part of and the movement that we've created to expose the deep state, to expose elitist actors, to expose the media, to expose government, Congress, GOP and Democrats alike, the corporate interests selling a nation, is far too important to get caught up or get ourselves caught up in a news cycle that aims to destroy us and slander us based on the actions of a few. What the president has done in his time in office is too important. He's exposed the deep state. He's exposed them for exactly what they are, and we need to figure out how to keep that going. We cannot give the elites and we cannot give the media, of course, an excuse or an element of sympathy to allow themselves to make themselves the victim, because of course we know they're hypocrites. We know that they're applying a complete double standard to Trump supporters as they did to left-wingers. It's absolutely clear, and now they're using it as an excuse to pass legislation to try to impeach the president once again, and even other things that have nothing to do with that and go even beyond. Everything is political. We need to figure out how to make this positive. They're going to try to castigate us as a negative force, as some sort of extremist force, which is something we've been running away from for how long, and we need to ensure that that does not happen. We need to fight in the long term with a long-term vision to keep this thing alive, to keep it afloat. Right now what's happening is this is going to be used as an excuse, and it's going to be held over our head for a very long time. They're going to come after people exactly like me, independent creators and the little guy trying to get down to the bottom of things, and they're going to use this as an excuse. They're going to try to suffocate us and push us down. They're going to try to kill our movement because our movement is the first time in decades that their grasp on power has been put into question. We are the anti-establishment movement, and we need to not get caught up in these tit for tats and these little battles and he said, she said, and focus on the bigger picture. Move forward from this and focus on primarying deep state operatives. Focus on exposing the lies and the manipulation tactics used by the global elites. We need to focus on not getting divided. This is what they want. They want us to go after each other. They want absolute abject chaos. They want us at each other's necks, like exactly what's going on Twitter right now. You have people condemning the violence. You have people supporting the violence. You have people claiming that it was an Antifa false flag. They're all fighting each other. You have people taking the side of the establishment on GOP. You have people who are saying make a third party, people who are disenfranchised and losing the will to vote whatsoever. And who benefits from that dynamic? It certainly isn't you. It certainly isn't freedom. It certainly isn't the populist movement. It is Russia, China, the Democrats, the elites, the media. Everybody who we are fighting against are the ones benefiting right now. We need to figure out how to regroup, re-strategize, and get the ball moving in a positive manner, because the elites are trying very, very hard to use this as a way to go back to the status quo of old and even exacerbate that and take it to the next level, creating a new status quo, a nightmare scenario which we must ensure never happens. But that's my perspective. After re-recording this video 6 times, after trying to gather all of my thoughts, I will not stand for violence. I will call it out. I will call out the media. I will call out the left wing. There's a whole lot of nuance here, but regardless of all of that, regardless of all the partisanship, the main focus has to be positive, and it has to be figuring out a way to go forward in a positive and productive manner. I think largely what happened in the Capitol was inevitable. Given the circumstance of 2020, the pressurized chamber effect, all piling on top of each other, it was to be expected, and I think there's a lot to learn from it. So let's remain positive and let's keep focusing on what really matters, and that's the abundant hypocrisy of the left and the globalist elites who seek to take over and control your everyday life. That's what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. Now I gotta get back to work, of course. I'm probably gonna be up quite late just gathering my thoughts and trying to get these videos together, but hopefully you enjoyed this one. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.